Hi, I'm Lucy Shamaro, and today I'm going to be making a enriched bread dough served with a baked camembert. So to start with, I'm going to warm my milk, and to that I'm also going to add my water. When working with yeast, you need to make sure that you are working around the 35 to 37 degrees, which is blood temperature. That way the yeast is happy and you'll get the best results from your ferment. So we're going to use strong flour today, so I'm going to add my strong flour to the bowl and get that ready. We're going to use strong flour because that's got a higher gluten present, so you'll get the best results from your dough. And today I'm going to use dry yeast. Now, working with dry yeast is the same as working with your fresh yeast. The difference is if your recipe requires to have fresh yeast, you need to divide the quantity by half, because obviously dried yeast is much stronger. So my milk has come up to blood temperature, so if I put my little finger in there, it doesn't feel uncomfortable, it feels just right. And to that I'm going to add my dried yeast and give that a little whisk in. Now the yeast itself has got to be woken up, so I'm going to add a good pinch of flour and sugar to my ferment and dissolve that up, and I'm going to place this into the prover for 10-15 minutes till it starts to foam and we know the yeast is active. Right. My ferment is now at the right stage, ready to go into the mixture. So what I'm going to do to my dough, I'm going to quickly add in the rest of my sugar, my salt, and give that a little mix. Now it's really important to mix that salt in properly before adding the ferment, because if the salt comes into contact with that yeast, it is going to kill it. So we need to make sure that is mixed in. I'll switch over to a dough hook. And turn this on. Now, like most enriched doughs, you would add the butter after the dough has been made. With something like a brioche, you would allow it to have a proof, then go in with the butter. But with this simple enriched dough, we're going to just add that in once the initial kneading has taken place in the bowl. So I'm going to add my ferment in, and just as I get to the end, I'm going to have a quick little mix on the bottom where the yeast has settled. To make sure none of that is wasted. And we're going to allow this to knead on the machine for about 5 minutes until it comes nice and smooth. At this point it will be a very sticky dough because you haven't got any butter in there to set it up, and you need it nice and soft to be able to add that butter in at a later date. And I'm just regularly just scraping down that bowl, making sure it is mixing evenly. So my dough has been kneading in the bowl for a few moments, and when you kind of look at it, it will still have a slight lumpy texture. So what you can do, if you want to smoothen that out, is just bring your hands into it. I always prefer to knead a little bit by hand because it gives you an idea of what the dough's texture and where it's at. And I'm going to return that to the bowl now. Put the machine on low, and I'm going to slowly drop lumps of butter into this as it's kneading so that it can enrich that dough ready for proving. And obviously as the butter starts to mix in, you'll hear the machine be able to free up a little bit and get a little bit more movement into that and softening up. Make sure you scrape down your hook regularly to make sure the dough is mixing in evenly. What you'll almost see, once the butter starts to mix in, you'll see the dough start to release in its texture and start mixing more freely. Once that happens, we can then put this to prove for about an hour, so it doubles in size, and then we can then work with it from there. So I can keep this going while Kieran sets up if it helps. And then it will go, I'll put it into prove from there. For the final stages of kneading, I like to have it onto the marble. So what I'm going to do, now it's got all this butter in it, it's going to become really, really sticky. So I'm just going to use a little bit of oil on the marble to mean it doesn't stick. But I like to knead by hand at the final stages. The warmth of your hand helps to activate that yeast a little bit more, and you get a little bit more of a consistent texture, and you can really work it well. I'm going to put some extra oil onto my hands so it does not stick to myself. And I'm going to go in. You can take your dough scraper, just bring it back together. Well, he said your hands will tell you what the dough needs. In there, you can see it slops around. But actually, once you get it on the bench and your hands start working it, it just brings it nice. You can see it sits nicely. And what I like about when dough's been kneaded enough and you give it a little press with your fingers, you can see it starts to bounce back. And that bouncing back tells you that the protein structure has been activated and you'll be able to mould it and get whatever shape you want from it. I'm going to place this back into the mixing bowl. I'm going to cling film it and place it into the prover for about an hour until it is doubled in size and ready for moulding. There she goes. So my dough has now had an hour in the prover, it's doubled in size and she is ready for us to start working with. But I'm going to prepare my tin first so that I have a place to put my dough ready for proving. So I've got myself a large 12-inch ring, which is about 1.5 inches in depth. And I'm just going to make a liner for this because obviously we are baking a camembert into the centre. So if we bake it straight onto the baking tray, the cheese will ooze out and we won't be able to present it nicely. So I'm going to make a quick cartouche. And I'm going to cut her a little bit bigger so she goes up the sides. Now, due to health and safety, I can't have my Camembert sat in a prover for another hour whilst it second proves. So I'm going to take the wooden case from the Camembert, and I'm going to wrap that in cling film and place that into the centre to be able to keep the space, so when it's ready I can slip the Camembert straight in. So onto my dough. So I'm going to scale my dough up into lumps of 200 grams. An average roll is 50 grams, but for the sake of a Tear'n'Share Camembert, we need to make sure that the rolls are small enough to be able to take and eat and be able to come back for more. I'm going to knock her back just a little bit so I can work with her. And using a dough cutter, I'm going to cut into lumps of 200. So for my 5 balls, I'm going to divide each one of these evenly into 8 pieces. And then cupping your hand into the shape of a C, you're going to use a circular motion on your bench to drag and tuck that dough under, making uniform balls of dough. I'm going to leave a small gap in between these to allow room for proving. And then I'm going to put a second ring of dough around this, but I'm going to alternate it in between, so as that bread proves, it has room to swell and become light and fluffy. Just make sure they're evenly spaced. I'm now going to cling film this and return it to the prover for another 45 minutes to allow that bread to prove up, ready for baking. So my dough has now been in the prover for 45 minutes and it is doubled up in size, and I'm going to prepare the Camembert to go in the centre. I have already pre-prepared some confit garlic, something that you can have en place in your fridges, easily grabbable and be able to improve the dish. So I'm going to take my Camembert, and with my knife I'm just going to make some nice little score lines in the top of the Camembert, just to allow it to melt and be useful for the Tear'n'Share. I'm then going to take some pieces of this confit garlic, which have been cooked in oil, just cut it up. And where I've done those cuts in, I'm going to press this confit garlic into those creases, so as it bakes it can flavour and work its way into that cheese. It's very soft. I'm also going to use some of that garlic oil at the end to brush onto the bread before serving, just to help that garlic flavour work its way in. And there we go. I'm going to cling them off. I'm going to take out my space saver And I'm going to put my cheese into the centre. And I'm going to glaze the tops of my rolls with a little bit of egg wash to give it a beautiful golden glaze when it comes out. I'm going to go all the way around, and then I'm going to place this in the oven between 15 to 20 minutes until they are nicely risen and golden. So my ring has been in the oven for 15 minutes and it's gone lovely golden and brown. I've removed it from the oven and given it a few minutes just to settle and to rest. Before serving, I'm going to take some of the lovely garlicky confit oil and I'm just going to brush that over my bread to give it a nice little finishing glaze, and it will also help to give a nice garlicky flavour to carry through every single bite. You could also use herbs, you could use thyme, rosemary, little sprigs in amongst that whilst it's cooking to get those festive flavours going. There we go. And then I'm just going to bring the tray over, slide it over, paper out, and serve it on that cartouche. And you could also put little jars of chutney down there, olives.